Hey everyone, someone sent in the question, what will happen during the next major recession with regard to Bitcoin? As you know, we have not had a major worldwide recession since 2008 and 2009. That has been a long time, and typically it's been a lot longer than it usually is. The reason for that is every time we've gotten close to a recession, the Federal Reserve has printed vast quantities of new money to make sure it doesn't happen, which I anticipate will also be the case in the future. But so I think there's two schools of thought here. One that says we're not going to have recessions anymore because we're just going to print so much money that we just avoid recessions. It's similar to, an alcoholic who is constantly trying to drink more alcohol to avoid a hangover. The body wants to have a hangover because there's no more alcohol and it wants to return to normal. But you can put off a hangover if you drink a bunch more alcohol. Obviously, that kills you in the long term, but in the short term, it can push back a hangover, and that's what the Federal Reserve tries to do. As soon as they start to get the withdrawal symptoms, whether you want to use the analogy of alcohol or opioids or whatever, as soon as they start to feel the withdrawal symptoms from printing too much money, which is what a recession is, it is the correction that happens after you print too much money. People use that too much money to do dumb stuff. And then at some point, the economy has to adjust to the fact that a lot of the things that people used the free money for did not work out, which is how that works. When you shower a bunch of money on anyone, they tend to do less responsible things with it. Businesses build things that are not economically viable because interest rates are cheap, because money was being flushed into the economy, et cetera, and the economy has to adjust. So that level of bad investments is called malinvestment, M-A-L investment. Malinvestment means bad investment that was caused by artificially low interest rates. Basically, you let people borrow a bunch of money for things that were not economically viable, that they would not have spent money on had interest rates been a more normal level. But because interest rates were super low and money was super cheap, a bunch of people did a bunch of stuff that wasn't economically viable. That malinvestment has to be worked out of the system because it was not sustainable, and that's what a recession is. Right now, the U.S. government is trying to avoid recessions by every time the economy starts to teeter on the brink a little bit, they goose it with a ton more printed money, hoping to avoid a recession. Now, that only works so long. At some point, it does catch up with you. It's the reason you can't just drink alcohol for the rest of your life and never have a hangover, because at some point your liver gives out and you die. Or same with opioids. You can't just, there's a limit to how much you can just try to avoid the withdrawal of something that you have gotten addicted to, or in the case of the economy, that the economy has gotten addicted to, like cheap money. Okay, so as a result of that, we don't know what Bitcoin's going to do in a massive worldwide recession, because Bitcoin was invented and released in 2009, and that was right on the bottom of the last recession, so it has not been through a major worldwide recession, so we don't know how it's going to respond. But what we do know is how it has responded in some sort of mini scares. So, for example, with worldwide sort of concern about worldwide, instability due to foreign policy, I guess. We've seen over the last number of years, we've seen Hamas attack Israel. Then we've seen Israel, Iran attack Israel. We've seen Israel attack Iran and Hamas. So the Middle Eastern dust-ups with regard to wars and foreign policy, and with Ukraine, in each case you saw a very temporary dip in the price of Bitcoin, and that is primarily caused by people selling what they can, not what they want to. So anytime there's a scare, and oftentimes these things happen over a weekend, people can only sell Bitcoin because you can't sell stocks or bonds or real estate because the markets are closed. So in the historical examples, even in COVID, which was March, hit the stock market in March of 2020, you saw a very temporary dip in the price of Bitcoin that was followed by a very quick recovery. So the first thing I think we can learn from the past, 15, 16 years of Bitcoin is that if there is an economic scare, in most cases, there is a very short, shallow, and quickly over dip in the price of Bitcoin, which I would expect would be the case if there's a worldwide economic recession. I think at some point, due to panic selling by people who have Bitcoin and are trying to avoid losing their houses, losing their cars, losing their businesses, losing all of everything they own, selling what they can, not what they want to sell, but selling what they can sell. And Bitcoin is something, because it is liquid, meaning you can buy or sell it 24/7, 365. It is the only asset that you can sell, for example, at noon on Christmas Day. You can sell Bitcoin, buy or sell Bitcoin anytime, day or night, 24/7. And so that's what happens when people get scared, when something spooks them. You get people who sell assets they can sell, even if they know that's not what they wanted to sell. Over time, that adjusts. And as they are able to offload stocks and offload bonds and offload real estate and buy back into Bitcoin, you see the price of Bitcoin recover very quickly when people have a choice to do so. So we've seen Bitcoin recover very quickly with downturns like that. One counterexample, which is probably the strongest counterexample, is the bank failures in March or April, I think it was March of 2023. So Silicon Valley Bank, what was it? It was Silicon Valley Bank. It was, Silvergate, and it was one other, but I'm not immediately remembering the other one. Anyway, three major banks that had banked the crypto industry and other industries had gotten over their skis. Only one of them was insolvent. The government shut the other two down basically as pure assassination as part of Operation Choke Point 2.0, which is where the Biden administration tried to choke off banking services to the cryptocurrency industry. And now that's all coming out with legal documents, and a bunch of people are getting in trouble and all that. But anyway, as part of Operation Choke Point 2.0, the Biden administration tried to choke off banking services to the cryptocurrency industry, and part of that was shutting down banks that were servicing the cryptocurrency industry. Now, one of the three banks actually was insolvent, meaning they had borrowed a bunch of long-range U.S. government bonds, meaning government debt that did not pay off for 10 or 20 or 30 years. And then they suddenly needed liquidity, meaning cash right now, and they couldn't get it. So Silicon Valley Bank, to the best of my recollection, actually was insolvent. The other two were completely fine. They were completely fine. The government shut them down anyway, basically as a way to try to cripple the cryptocurrency industry. Okay. So in that case, the price of Bitcoin actually went up. So it was a financial scare. People were concerned about the banks. They were concerned that their money might not actually be there, that the FDIC would not actually come through with bailing out everybody the way everyone expected. And the result of that was the price of Bitcoin actually went up because people were panicking and they had lost faith, at least temporarily, in the traditional financial system. So that is a good example of sort of the opposite thing happen. Rather than a temporary dip, you actually get a rise in the price of Bitcoin. So in the long term, we don't know, because Bitcoin has not been through a major financial recession or depression. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but the data points we do have would indicate that if there is a dip in the price of Bitcoin, it will be short-lived. And heck, Bitcoin has dips in its price all the time. So it's not like a dip in the price of Bitcoin is anything new. So if there are dips, they are short-lived. And if if there's a financial scare where people lose confidence in the financial system as a whole, historically, in the case of where the banks blew up, it has resulted in the price of Bitcoin actually going up rather than down as people do a flight to safety. And in this case, flight to safety meaning they're scared of that they're going to lose assets in the existing financial system, and they are therefore buying Bitcoin instead. So that would be my prediction. And so as far as what does that mean with regard to the assets I have in Bitcoin, which is, again, right about 97% of my liquid assets, as far as the 97% of my liquid assets that are in Bitcoin, it means nothing. It means if there is a worldwide recession, the price of Bitcoin might dip temporarily. And if so, so what? I'll just wait it out. Who cares? And if it goes up, well, all the better, because I'm in it for the long haul anyway. So one thing I would definitely not do is wait for a recession. There are people that have been waiting to buy cheap Bitcoin as a result of the worldwide recession back from 2022. And they have watched the price go from below $20,000 to, now nearly $100,000 per Bitcoin, waiting for a recession to knock 10 or 20% off the price. Well, obviously, if a massive worldwide recession knocks 10 or 20 or even 30% off the price, you're not going to get anywhere close to $20,000 Bitcoin. So historically, anybody who has waited for some big macro, meaning big picture event, to dip the price of Bitcoin so they could buy it cheaper, they've ended up losing out almost every time, because the macro, the recession or the depression never comes, or by the time it actually does show up, the price of Bitcoin has risen so high that the dip is still much higher than they could have bought it for previously. So that historically, basically everybody who tries to, game the price of Bitcoin by guessing what the price should be or could be, or, when they're going to buy it and all that, historically everybody who has tried to do that has ended up buying Bitcoin a lot more expensive or just straight up missing out entirely. So I would definitely not recommend doing that, because there's just no way to time the market. There's no way to know if or when there will be a recession. There's no way to predict how Bitcoin will respond when there is a recession, and we just don't know. Now, one upside to Bitcoin going through a recession is it will remove a major potential, what people call a black swan event. A black swan event, I guess maybe a recession would not qualify as a black swan event, but an event where Bitcoin has not experienced it and you don't know how it would respond. So a lot of people are not buying Bitcoin today because it hasn't been through a recession. So they just don't know. They don't feel confident buying an asset that has not been through a recession because they don't know how it's going to respond in a recession. Now, the truth is every asset responds differently in every recession. So, you could have looked at the housing market in the, mini recession of 1991 or the dot-com boom in the year 2000 or whatever, and you could have said, well, at least I know it never applies to housing. Well, the next recession was all about housing. So anytime you're trying to use the past recession to predict the future recession, it typically, is not very predictive. That being said, there are a lot of people that once Bitcoin has lived through a big worldwide recession will say, great, now I know I don't have to worry about something horrible happening in that scenario, and it results in people actually buying more Bitcoin. So anytime you can remove uncertainty for people, it helps. And once Bitcoin's been through a worldwide massive recession, then people will no longer be saying, I'm going to wait to see how it responds in a massive worldwide recession before I buy it. And so every time you can remove something like that, it's helpful, including like when the banks blew up or were assassinated in the case of Silvergate and the other bank. When those banks were assassinated in March of 2023, that removed a lot of uncertainty, because now people knew with certainty how Bitcoin would respond in a scenario where suddenly the financial system got fragile all of a sudden, because that's exactly what happened. And suddenly people were nervous, and we found out that Bitcoin goes up in that situation. So anyway, Bitcoin has not yet been through a worldwide massive recession. If there is a dip, I think it will be short-lived. And there's a chance, like when the bank scare happened in March of 2023, that the price of Bitcoin will actually go up rather than down. Regardless, I think Bitcoin will outperform every other conceivable asset. I continue to believe it is a great time to buy Bitcoin, and I am always here for anything you could possibly need related to Bitcoin or anything else. Just let me know. Thanks, everyone.